Okay, this is a follow-up. We started with dimensioning. One other annotation tool I think you really ought to be aware of is hatching, but I want to really get you aware of how much associative is, how important it is, and how much some of this hatching and the like is kind of limiting within 2D, though it's important to be able to do it when you get your details out. So I generally don't use hatch. I use bhatch because it goes along with the command bpoly. Very often it's a nice idea to make a layer for that, particular for that, the hatching. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got the dimension here. I don't really want to look at the dimensions right now. So you remember how we use our layer commands. We can go to here, we can turn off the dimension toolbar maybe, or turn off the dimension layer. I can make a layer here and call it hatching. Again, you would have more than one layer perhaps with hatching on it. I'm going to give it a basic color, though later on, very often you're going to be controlling this in pen tables, in plot styles. I'm going to make that my hatching, and I turn off my dimension layer, and I hit something like that. Again, I use the command bhatch. First off, bhatch is like bpoly. I'm going to go one more time. I'm going to do a quick kind of change here. I'm going to put a little circle here, and in another layer, if I use the command bpoly, this bpoly makes an extra set of a closed polyline if I asked it right inside of there. So I can do it. Usually I would be doing that bpoly. I might be going ahead, I can either make it a polyline or a region. Very often I'd rather make the polylines first, hit over the top, list last. List last is an important one. Remember, you can make anything a region by saying region and then grabbing the object. Why do you use regions? So you can do mass prop and get a lot more than just the area. You get the area, you get the moments of inertia, radii of gyration, etc. Pointing out here that when you're working with trying to get engineering properties of materials, it's a better idea to be in architectural no matter what you're doing, because it does give you some clue to some of these inches that are so important. With the moment of inertia, the radii of gyration, the centroid, etc. being described right there. I'm going to ELA for last. ELA for last does a last erase. I'm going to erase that out. That command was bpoly. For boundary poly, I like to use bhatch. Bhatch has very similar things. You can do actually user defined, you can use custom, you can use gradients, all kinds of different stuff you can play inside of there. But the reality is, again, this bilayer becomes something you really want to tend to stick to, especially if you're going to be doing references. You need to see that these can be, you can include or not include the boundaries, all this different stuff, but I want to generally look here at the idea by picking points. And I'm going to first show you the solid. Pick points. I'm going to click right in there, and it makes a solid. You can preview it, and it makes a solid hatch. That can be good or bad. I'm going to hit cancel here and do it again, bhatch. There's all kinds of different standard hatch patterns here, right? And there's lots more out on the web. For instance, earth right there. Kind of things you can change is the angle and the scale. Obviously, those would be kind of things that will change the look of something there. For instance, show you that. That's going to be a very dense pattern, right? I'm going to hit an escape. That's no good, so I might want to check the scale. Same type of thing. I'm an architectural. I might want to immediately start to guess at 12. That's not bad, but I can then go up 24, which would be twice as big as that. Preview. There's some thought to that. I can hit OK. That applies the hatch. Once again, it's associative, so if I do stretch, now we'll see what happens because I have my dimensions. You notice that hatch follows along with that. Let's see if in fact the dimensioning did as well follow along with that. So this general bit of, I'm going to turn that layer on now, see if in fact, even though the layer wasn't turned on, it did. So by having these kind of lines extended, there was some association between the endpoint there. That's kind of a key thing to get. I'll do a couple more hatches here. I'm going to take the same hatch here, but go ahead and do it at a different angle. Hatches are great if you're doing black and white stuff, because if you're doing black and white stuff, you can't differentiate with color. So anything that's really being laid out well to differentiate will have one hatch particularly, and if you're using color, you'll have different hatches for different materials. It's used a lot, as Lindsay Lohan would say in that great movie, a lot in architectural work for your typical sections, cross sections. So I'm going to go, we're still in hatching. Remember the command like bhatch, bpoly, those are boundary commands. They make things pretty easy sometimes. So bhatch. This time I'm going to go ahead and pick my points in there. I'm going to use the same general bit, but I'm going to change the angle now here to maybe 45 degrees. You'll get a whole different look, even though, and so you get that ability to differentiate. Very often, you just don't want two of the patterns next to each other. They're the same. You can later on, of course, go back if you need to and just freeze out your object layer, and it should still show the hatches. That's one of the ideas. You put things on different layers. You can turn that off right now. You can see just the hatching is there. So there's some value to that. Go back. That's again layer manager, this idea of using LMAN right here to remember what's on, what's off, what's red, what's blue for different bits. I'm going to go ahead. Remember layers toolbar. That's a great toolbar right there, the layers 2 toolbar. Anything so good it has to have 2, like New York, New York. When you hit that, freezes out a layer. Learn to play around with that. I'm going to finally do this bhatch, where it should generally be able to find that hole, which should be something else. It should not be hat. So let's see what happens now. Bhatch. Once again, there should be an island detection typically around here. There should be an island connection. We'll see what it does here. We'll grab something different. There's all kinds of different ones to do. Standard ones. Gasground sounds good to me. So I'm going to pick points. When I pick that, it should find that. I'm going to preview it. Unable to hatch the boundary. Interesting. So it can't do it. So we're going to go ahead and view selections here. Enter, right click to enter the dialog. I'm going to hit OK. It can't do it. Bhatch. Select objects. I'm going to select that object and that object, and I'm going to preview it. It cannot accept that hat, so we're going to try to do another one. We'll try to do insulation. We'll hit a preview here and that. So some hatches work, some don't, depending on the situation. I don't know what that difference was. But this idea, once again, is you do a stretch. That is something later you're going to see you'll do a fair bit of. If you're good, you'll use a lot of at. For instance, 4 angle 90. I'm going straight up. I just made that 4 longer. If we go ahead now and turn on our layers, we do a lot of this layer on and offing with Layer Manager. I'm not doing it here, but right now you notice how those things stretched up and went within. So, once again, putting hatches on layers that are front-end loaded or back-end loaded. So you might have something like object-hatch or view1-hatch or hatch.view1. This layering without spaces inside, so you can eventually make some sense of it. When you write some things out, when you remember how you do write block, this is associative. So we're just going to last check this idea of transferring information between. Sometimes you start to experiment. When you write block this out, the association will be broken. So I'm going to show you what a W block means, or just a block, I guess. Remember block? I don't like to use block. I use what? -B for block. And our block name would be hatch. Insertion base point, I'm going to go ahead and tell it this. Now it's not 0, 0. I'm going to tell it that information. I'm going to grab this, and it went out. So you notice the hatch boundary associativity removed. Oops, one of the great commands of all time. Now if we do bedit, you see that hatch is out there. Here's a new tip for you. If you're not going to explode dimensions, do not explode hatches. It will get to be a mess. But right in that, you can see that you can kind of come up with some nice information that, again, could be useful as much for sending out to other programs in a nice 2D graphic mode as it is within the 3D. You'll see a lot of this becomes a little bit more dynamic when you get into this kind of 3D world where you're cutting sections. Usually you'll see hatching will be when you do a section view. And I believe pretty much, like I've told you before, there's a fair bit of ability within some of these programs to do these sections actively. Let the program do it. So that's the use of hatch. Remember, you're here, you're going to close that out, close the block editor. We're going to save the changes to the hatch. In reality, it's not even in there, but I could do I for insert. I could bring in the hatch. Somehow you notice there, that hatch there. You notice I'm going to bring it out to the sides. You just kind of got to, right? I've got a copy of the hatch out here. That's now as a property. I can left click spacebar, 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 scale, maybe 0.5, make it so it's small. You notice things start to come down underneath. Hatch, once again, has properties, right click. Talking fast, I know. A lot to do, and you've got some basic properties here on the hatch, or on that block. If we then explode that block, like we tend to do, explode, now that's a block, right click, now you can see the hatch properties. So, thanks for listening. That's it for hatching and dimensioning.